All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another Permian Basin Adult Literacy Center author live stream. My name is Jessica Bexley. I serve on the board for the PBALC. As always, we want to start off by thanking Southwest 66 Credit Union for sponsoring our 2023 author live streams. September is National Literacy Month, and this month we are featuring several great authors. Today, I'm so excited to welcome guest author Kathryn Brown Ramsperger, the author of A Thousand Flying Things. Welcome, Kathryn. We are so excited to have you today. Please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your history.
Jessica, I'm just delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks to the Literacy Center, you, Andrea, and Southwest 66 for the opportunity. So a little about me. I'm a lifelong writer. The first short story I published was at Roanoke College when I was 16. They had a contest. I submitted a story called A Gossamer Thread, and I won, and they published it. And since then, I've never stopped, but I needed to make a living. And so I first wrote for my local newspaper and my alma mater's publications office. And then an internship with Jimmy Carter led me to DC, where I wrote for National Geographic and Kiplinger. And my husband and I have lived most of our adult lives here, except for about a decade where I was traveling and living in Africa and Europe and the Middle East. I kind of graduated after I got my master's to being a humanitarian journalist. And so I was able to travel with the International Red Cross and Red Crescent. And during these 2.5 decades, I covered a lot of war and famine and disaster, everything from Katrina to Chinese earthquakes to Somali famines. The civil war in Rwanda actually inspired much of this novel. The novel is fiction, but the people are kind of real. The composites that I just interviewed reams of paper, and you can only get that 15-second soundbite. And I had their stories, and I wanted to share them with the world. And the other thing I did was I did a lot of work on the global HIV/AIDS blood crisis. And you would think with all of this calamity, I would be pessimistic, but I'm more optimistic than anything. There are dark moments in my books, but both of them are based on my humanitarian work and the wonderful, courageous people I met. And they're the people that gave me hope to write these books.
What an amazing history. I mean, truly such a life that, it's no wonder you have so much inspiration to write stories. You've lived some really amazing things. As you know, here at the Permian Basin Adult Literacy Center, adult literacy is our primary focus. And as I said, it is National Literacy Month. Why is adult literacy an important topic to you?
I do know it's a really important month, and I'm honored to be here to speak in such an important month for literacy, because without readers, writers wouldn't write. And a writer of books would have no job. I obviously think reading is one of the most important things in the world because it allows us to walk in each other's shoes. That's the reason. That's the most important thing about it for me. And a literacy center brings the world together in a common language, and they can share their stories and start to read stories in English as well. There's no more important time for such an effort, in my opinion, because we're not in silos anymore. The world is just connected, and we're writing a greater story for humanity right now. And the more literate people become and educated become, because education can save lives, the better it is for the world. And I just want to give a shout out to my family members. My son, his very first job was as an English as a second language teacher in a literacy center. And my daughter is adopted from China. And we live in a very international area outside Washington, D.C. And there would be, I won't call them diplomats, they really work for National Institutes of Health. They would come, the children, and they wouldn't be able to speak or read English. And she would sit down and read to them. So it's almost part of my family, my love of teaching people to read. And there's no accident that my protagonist, Diana Calloway, is teaching young children to read as my novel opens.
Yes, absolutely. Literacy builds communities in such a way that other things really can't. It's vital to everything that we do.
And movies can't do it either. I just want to add that. Movies are different because we're given a perspective and we're given an image on the screen. This is all, we make it all up as we read.
That's right. It is. So I know you mentioned that, your first published story, you were 16. When did you actually start writing? Was it something you were always passionate about, or did that kind of develop over time?
So it did develop over time, but I had a very adamant mother who was a bit frustrated in writing herself. And she could tell from a really early age that I was a good writer. I also loved music. And
does that mean that you told a lot of lies?
She was.
I told a lot of stories, and so my mom was like,
She wasn't into them at all. But yes, I did tell a few. And I had a really active imagination. And sometimes she encouraged it and sometimes she didn't. But I can be a little stubborn, and I really could be stubborn as a kid, and I wanted to be a musician. But she saw from a really early age that I'm a mezzo and I sing for weddings and funerals, but I was not going to be Cher. And so she and my fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Covey, and my world lit teacher in high school, Mr. Johnson, they all lit a spark in me because they encouraged me and their enthusiasm was contagious. And so by the time I won my high school English award and got published in that college literary magazine, I was hooked and I never looked back. Writing is part of every career I've ever had.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's get specifically into the book now. What can you tell our viewers about 1,000 Flying Things?
Thank you for asking. So 1,000 Flying Things is the sequel to this book, which is it's a standalone sequel, but this is the first in the series. And so the male protagonist in 1,000 Flying Things is introduced. Both of them are introduced. Well, I thought I had it, but I don't. In Shores. And 1,000 Flying Things is about choices and challenges. The English proverb, better a bird in the hand than two in the bush, is a different saying in Sudan. It's better a bird in the hand than 1,000 flying things. And that's why I named it like that. And it's about choices and seeing what's there, what's already there, the gifts you already have, the people that are standing right in front of you, and seeing them for their reality. So this second standalone sequel, it shares the struggles of an American humanitarian assigned to a non-governmental organization in war-ravaged South Sudan. And her mission is ostensibly to teach children in a displaced persons camp to read. They send books in English, but these children don't speak much English, and so her work is cut out for her. And other challenges she has are she contracts malaria, and of course, the divided government. Sudan is still at war, and this takes place in 1991 when it was ravaged by civil war, South Sudan, and a powerful warlord who he would call himself a tribal leader, um, who is harboring a mysterious child who is named Khalil. Diana has to navigate the fine line between political correctness, both with her NGO and this antagonist, Beale. But she's fervent in her innate sense of justice for children. So it's a really tough place for her to be. And it's all complicated when she falls ill. She's in the hospital in Nairobi, and she's trying to get a visa for this child who she believes is in grave danger. And she bumps into a long lost love from Lebanon, Kassim, in the embassy. And you would think that she would stick around for a while, but the child has her heart. Khalil has her heart, and he can't talk her out of going back. But events deem otherwise. Her destiny is set, but she thinks she has to choose whether to save a tiny child in trouble, who she suspects he's been groomed as a child soldier, or to reconnect with the love of her life. And yet things are not what they seem to her. So,
yeah. And, you spoke about choices. Reading the book, there are so many choices that we're faced with every day, and we just never know, what if I had picked this other door? And the book is just beautiful. Your writing, the settings, the characters, everything just comes alive, and I want to share that with our readers now. Can you read a selection for us?
I'd love to. So this is when the little boy enters the picture. And it's from the very first chapter. Today, Diana is reading from the Jungle Book, but none of them are listening. The few boys in front of her are exhausted before the day even begins from yesterday's hard work and training. They probably have little time in their day for fantasy stories with talking tigers and snakes. Nothing like their own lives. A colonial wrote the Jungle Book 100 years ago. School is over for her as much as for them. They've been here almost an hour. She slams the book shut and drops it with a thud on her crates. After class, the boys play football with an ancient, deflated soccer ball. They use tent poles as goalposts and the younger boys as goalies. She brings her old Polaroid camera out. The boys drop their football and race toward this contraption, a camera from her past, but an object these boys have never seen. The resulting yellow, blurred images create quite a stir in this little camp. The children love to see themselves. They delight in making faces for the camera. They even primp sometimes, hoping she will choose to snap one of them. It is more than a conversation starter. It is a showstopper, marketing her words with their pictures. Still, she doubts. At least in North Carolina, she could visit the library with them. Books could make her forget the heavy air, the heat electrifying up her spine, her mother lying down in the next room in her own sort of limbo. Books could even rid her of the pain of her monthly cycle or empty stomach when she was sent to her room without dinner. Reading's more important than running. Reading is more important than food. It fills the emptiness of this place when she longs for love and attention. Yet would words ever mean as much to these boys as they did to Diana? Would they lay down their rifles to turn the pages of the books she provided. Her mind her mind pushes against the languid heat that presses her into the earth, and her lungs try to take in more air. The smell of overused cooking oil, reminiscent of the many meals fried in it, cuts the air like a scythe. She longs for just one ice cube. That is when she sees a young child's hand. The hand waves at her from behind a large nearby rock. Flat on top, nature's idea of a throne, the stone hides the rest of the child's body. The hand itself, though, is a work of art. It is a hand a hyena could tear off with one swift chomp. Tiny, ragged fingernails, dirt caked over hidden fingerprints, flies buzzing this way and that. Yet the wrist is another thing altogether, smooth and shiny and strong. She takes up her Polaroid and begins snapping. The shutter clicks and the photos whirl out until the film is gone. They fall at her feet, creating a small dust storm. The specks float suspended in the air, then rest one by one on the photos. She wants to wash his hands to see what lies beneath this grime, so she walks around the rock, obscuring the body that owns this miniature man's hand. It's the boy from this morning. Hello? She wonders if he will understand even that simple greeting. Hey, he answers. Her eyes go wide. How does he know that word? Most boys know hi or hello, but seldom use it because she greets them in their own language. And this boy looks barely old enough to speak many words at all. I teach myself book. The boy smiles. You help? Do you speak English? Diana fumbles in a mixture of English, Arabic, and Dinka. English. The little boy smiles again, attempting to mimic her sounds. Then she slaps her hand with his, reaches in her pocket, finds an English tea biscuit, and he pops it whole into his mouth. Tank. Dinah laughs at his pronunciation, wondering how long it took him to learn the sentence he greeted her with. Her heart is in her ears. She may have found her student.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. I have a few more questions, but we did have a question from a viewer, so I want to make sure we get to that.
Okay.
How did your time in the work that you did with National Geographic influence your writing?
So I started out at a very low-level research job, and I should have been more grateful because I was researching the slides that the photographer. I would research every slide a photographer took, and then I would sit with the photographer and interview them. Can you imagine? But I was
How do
20.
I get that job?
You have to call the human resources person every day until she says, okay, I give up. Come in. That's what I did. Really. It was an absolutely amazing job. And they were starting to computerize the slides. So I was part of that as well. So I was seeing parts of the world that I would never have seen, not even in the magazine, by the way, not even in their books. They did have a TV show, but they didn't have a channel yet. And so I was mesmerized a lot of the time. Of course, I was a writer, and so I would go off on a tangent, and they'd have to cut out a bunch of writing. But I just want to say that I've never been there, but my favorite set of slides was Molokai in Hawaii. And I think that was when I kept saying, I need to go there. I need to go there. And that was the beginning. I knew I always wanted to travel, but I didn't know how much I yearned for it until those slide selections. It's a beautiful island.
Yeah. And you can definitely tell from the book, that you've seen these places, whether it was with your own eyes or maybe through photographs, that you definitely capture the setting of foreign culture very, very well.
Thank you. I always say that the book's imaginary, but the love is real.
Yeah. if there was one thing that you would hope readers would take from the book, what would it be?
So I've got something at the very beginning that I think says it in a nutshell, but so many people skip past the prefacing pages. And I say, we run from love, though it is what we most want. Seldom do we gain the wisdom it shares. Rarely does love find us again. Never do we see it coming, or when, or how. So it's my belief that as a humanitarian, as a writer, and as a person, that if we come at problems with negotiation, even if we have boundaries, and use our words just like we do in the kindergarten playground, instead of finger pointing and blame and guns and knives, we can solve these problems. And the world needs that more than anything right now. Humans really do have more in common than different. I've seen that the world over. We need to stop a moment and think about why a person might be saying or doing what they're saying or doing. And we need to take our blinders down and realize that our perspective is our perspective. It's not everybody's perspective.
And that's another wonderful thing about literacy, right? And stories.
Mm-hmm.
How else are we going to learn unless we're reading about someone else and developing a relationship with a character and seeing another way of thinking? I think that's really great. That's wonderful. So I see from your website that in addition to being a writer, you are also an intuitive creativity coach. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
I am. So my books are character driven, and they are because I've always been fascinated with what makes people tick. That's one of the reasons, you could say, curiosity caused me to start writing. And if I hadn't been a writer, I would have probably been a psychologist. People fascinate me. And so I had a master's already. I had two masters, really. And so I thought, and I had little tiny children, and I thought, do I really want to get a PhD? Not really. And so I got certified in life coaching. And then I created my own process, especially for creatives, but it could work for anybody, called Step Into Your Story. What I find with students and clients and everybody who's always longed to write a book, but perhaps hasn't yet, is that they have this little gremlin on their shoulder that tells them they can't, or they're not good enough, or their story's not good enough, or it has to be this over here or that over there. So beyond coaching people about pitching or pacing or phrasing or voice or any of that, that'll come. I need to get people to sit down and write. And to do that, my most emphatic advice for them is to not to give up. I had an amazing career for 20 years, and then it took me 20 years practically to publish these two books. And I've had a third novel that I won an award for, and it's never been published. So you can't say it's not good enough. You just have to keep going. It's a career. And if you keep at it, you'll finish your first book and your next book, and you'll find a way to get published and find your readership, like I'm here today.
Definitely. Yeah. That's finding your reader is the key. Not everyone is always going to like everything, but your reader is out there.
There's plenty of people that don't necessarily like my books, but there is an audience that absolutely loves them.
Yeah.
And I have found them.
So for that audience that loves them, can you share anything about some upcoming projects you may be working on?
Thank you for that. So projects, I'm working on a memoir. And it's called, it's about my very first boyfriend, because I write about love. and all its complications. And it's also about me becoming the woman I am today at a very early age. I didn't know that's what was happening. But that love affair catalyzed me to become incredibly strong in my desire for a career and to stand in my power as a woman. And it's called I can't remember. It's called my first fiance. This is a working title. My early adventures in love, squalor, and misogyny.
There's a lot going on there.
There was a lot going on. That's why I really learned a lot in my early years. And I think a lot of times as young women, we can jump from the pot into the frying pan. We can go from any dysfunction in our own families of origin into the next family that has the same kinds of dysfunctions. And it's sort of about that too. And being a woman just coming into my own during the feminist movement has something to do with it as well. And also, besides writing this, I'm judging this wonderful first novel prize. And I feel like I've gone to heaven because the books that I'm reading are just amazing. It's called the McLaughlin Estman Stearns First Novel Prize.
Oh, that sounds great. Well, we here at PBALC also love reading and love books. We are in the middle, kind of coming to the end of our summer readathon. So what are you currently reading? And do you have any recommendations for us?
I feel like I'm coming to the end of my summer readathon too. I've got one. This is my favorite debut so far, but I've got till September 25th. So it's New to Liberty by Demisty D. Bellinger. It has a highly unusual structure, but I love it. It is about differences like my work, and it's also about freedom, and it's about finding a way toward freedom, even in the midst of horror and abuse. It's told in 3 different eras, and she's a wonderful storyteller. New to Liberty is the name of that book. And I am just about to begin Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmer. And I've heard, I don't have any preconceived notions except that it's gotten a lot of talk. So I can't wait to start that one.
Yeah, it's good. Get ready. If people want to know more about you, how can they find you?
Thank you, Jessica. I just want to thank you for the time we spent together and to spell my name. My name is as complicated as anything, but you can Google 1,000 Flying Things and you can find me. My website, I finally broke down and had a website with my full name, and it has Brown because of my parents and their encouragement toward my writing. I would never not use my maiden name. Kathryn is spelled Kathryn. Brown is like the color, Brown. Ramsperger is Ramsperger. Nobody got that, but just Google. And you can find me on most social media at Kathy Ramsperger. My books are available on almost every online retailer and is starting to get into indie bookstores. I'm really excited about that because I am such an advocate for indie bookstores, and I'm on a bit of a tour right now to some of them. And my TikTok name, my book talk name, which I'm having so much fun with, is Kathy Ramsperger 5.
Great. That's wonderful. Well, I want to thank you again, Kathy, for joining us this afternoon. Everyone, make sure you check her out on social media, on her website. 1,000 Flying Things is available now. I got mine from Amazon, but I also typically like to do the indie bookstores as well. It's available now. Go add it to your reading list. Make sure you log in next week to listen to our next author interview. Thank you for watching, and thank you as always to Southwest 66 Credit Union. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.